So hello everybody, good afternoon from Cambridge, UK. I'm Will Pritchard and I am the speaker liaison for GapSummit 2020. Welcome to this chain interview. Here we'll be following the journey of a biotechnology entrepreneur. And it's my pleasure to welcome our speakers. We have Dr. Jun Axup, Scientific Director and Partner at IndieBio, the world's leading life science accelerator. We have Dr. Maria Chatzou, the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Lifebit, a cloud-based genomic platform which enables integration and analysis of diverse data to accelerate insights in a safe, fair, and cost-effective way. We're also joined by Dr. Andrew Mearns-Spragg, the founder and Chief Scientific Officer of Jellagen, an innovative marine biotechnology company providing next-generation collagen material derived from jellyfish. And last but not least, we're joined by Boyle, one of the co-founders of Owlstone Inc., a spin-out from Cambridge University. And he subsequently translated this technology into the medical space, founding Owlstone Medical, delivering breath biopsy technology across a broad spectrum of clinical conditions. So let's get to know our speakers and learn from the front line of starting a biotech venture, scaling the business, and beyond. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Jun Axup.
Thank you, Will, and thank you to the entire GapSummit crew for the invitation and setting up this amazing conference. Really excited to share the entrepreneurship journey of the great three speakers we have today. A little bit on my background. I started as a scientist and am now the Chief Science Officer for IndieBio. We're a startup accelerator. And so it is my passion to help scientists become entrepreneurs and using biology as a technology to solve the world's biggest problems in human and planetary health. And so kind of breaking that down is, why do you think scientists can actually make great entrepreneurs? Because I think traditionally entrepreneurs did not birth from scientists, although arguably in the very beginning, many scientists did become entrepreneurs. And part of it is scientists really are hypothesis driven. We've been really trained to test and build hypotheses. And you can apply that mindset to both science and business. Scientists are extremely versatile, resourceful. You're very persistent based on your training. You have to be, because doing innovation is extremely hard and you have to find ways to really push forward. There are skills that scientists do need to learn to really become entrepreneurs, such as learning, communication, selling an idea, leadership, and teamwork. And those are all things that you can develop as an entrepreneur and really kind of start building your idea into a company. Today, I think biology has shifted. But originally, biology is where you look at how the body works under a microscope. But today, biology is now technology. It's an engineering science. We can do biology faster, cheaper, better by outsourcing, by using all kinds of different tools, computation. And so now we can make faster design, build, test cycles so that you can actually build with biology, turn biology into a product, and use that to benefit society. And kind of lastly, around problems, it is my belief that biology is so powerful, and by definition, biology can grow and therefore it can scale. We are biology. The world is based on biology, and now biotech doesn't also have to be just pharma, which traditionally has been the case. We can now use organisms like bacteria, fungi, algae to start growing all kinds of different things, such as lab-grown meats or mushroom leather, or we can recycle waste into energy or break down plastics, save the bees. We can use computation and biology to better discover drugs, to do better diagnosis for cancer. As many of our panelists today will really exemplify the diversity of what you can now do with biology. So biology is here to help save the planet and save our own health. And we think that scientists are the ones who are going to drive this. And so I'm really excited here to be here today and to share with, for everyone, the journeys of some amazing entrepreneurs. And hopefully you would consider, as the audience, taking this path as well. So in this first chain interview, I will be asking Maria basically how she got started. And so Maria has a PhD in biomedicine and a master's in bioinformatics, and that has kind of combined for using those two skills to build her company. So Maria, first, what was the spark that made you think, hey, I actually can be an entrepreneur instead of just being a scientist?
Yes, thank you everyone for having, and thanks for the question, Jen. I mean, the initial spark was always there. Like most of the scientists, there is this wrong conception that scientists doing science is just because like maybe we are crazy and weird, and like we love answering like weird questions. But actually, the reality for most of the scientists doing science is that they are there because they deeply care about something, right? So, and they are there for the impact that can have, and they identify, at least in my beginning of my career, and this is the same for most of the science out there, they identify going to science and going to research as at that point the only way to actually have impact. So for me, it has always, and the same goes also for my co-founder, because we're both very similar backgrounds. Computer scientists turn to bioinformaticians, turn to biomedical researchers, eventually turn to entrepreneurs. And for both of us, that was the thing. Like we eventually realized that, of course, we can continue being researchers, but we can actually have even faster and more impact by actually creating a company. And that was the aha moment for both of us, where we said like, okay, let's actually give it a shot and see where it takes us.
Amazing. So tell us about your company and what was that impact that you want to create?
So for Lifebeat, what again, both my co-founder and I found ourselves when we were being researchers and doing our PhDs and other things that we're doing, is that our job was to analyze huge volumes of genomics and multi-omics data and try to decipher everything from like basic biology and what makes us, and and every living organization, every living organism out there work, down to like understanding diseases and translational research, and how that biology can be then translating to, as I said, preventing diseases and improving our well-being. So and soon enough, when we were doing that, and we're now talking almost 8 years back, but like we found ourselves actually spending most of our time, 80% of our time, on dealing with all of the computational and the data management aspects of it, because the data were simply so big, so complex, big and complex beyond imagination, pretty much, right? And then we decided already as researchers to do something about it, and having both of us having computational backgrounds, we're just like, there's something that we can do here to free ourselves from the slavery of computation and data. And that's what we did. We created many different open source tools, and a lot of them are widely used, and especially one of them now has become one of the main tools in the industry. And then what we then perceived as a niche of like our, the top research institutes that we would work at that point, actually we started realizing that it is the current reality. And how we started realizing that is because, a lot of like different companies and research organizations started contacting us, and we were put into a point where we're providing support and consultancy, and we're being pulled toward that direction more and more. And then we're like, whoa, what's happening here? And that was the point where, long story, we came to Lifebit, and the main mission of Lifebit was its dual mission: democratize the how we analyze this data, right? Making it easy for everyone to analyze and make sense of this data. It's at the number one mission. And number two is actually deploy artificial intelligence that will be able to then extract even more insights out of this data that normally, like just a singular human brain would not be able to, right? So that's pretty much the mission of the company.
That's super great. So you actually started building tools for yourself, essentially, because you found your own need based as a practicing bioinformatician, and then realizing that there's a greater need in society too. So so that's very great from the kind of an organic standpoint of this. So what were the
sorry, if I can add something on that, which I think is very important to be said, like why scientists can become really great entrepreneurs, it is because of this end end user innovation, as I call it. They've already went through something. They already know the subject matter very, very well, right? So when they are coming to do a company, they sort of like almost already solve that problem at a smaller scales or at some other point, right? They're not just a 20-year-old excited with something, trying to create the next Instagram, right?
Yeah, definitely coming out of experience. So then what were the early days like for you? And especially how did you have a shift from kind of academic mindset into an industry mindset? And what did you find most challenging there?
Yeah, 100%. As you said, there are many different skill sets that scientists need to actually master before they do the transit into business, especially into entrepreneurship and being a founder and CEO, and then trying to get a hyper growth company, because of course you can create all types of companies. So for us, I already knew that I needed all of that. So I was just like, both with my co-founder, we were like, we're only going to be doing this, and if we're going to be doing it right. So we applied for Techstars Accelerator. We're very successful. We're selected to be on the cohort, 2017 cohort. Techstars was really amazing on training us. And as I always like to say, and always, pay my respects and thanks to Techstars, like I believe that we entered Techstars having a project, not really a company, and we exited Techstars by having a company, right? I don't believe at that stage, you could call we had a company. And during Techstars, I think the early days was a lot of like mastering the business language. Like I remember on the early days trying to explain people my idea, which is like, no one could understand what we were talking about, right? And how we were going about things. So I think communication skills and simplifying and staying on point and staying on message is something that researchers are not trained to do very, very well, because researchers are trained to do very bottom-up communication, where they start saying, so we observe this, and then we observe this, and then we observe this, and this leads to this, and then they come to the conclusion. Whereas business communication is the exact opposite. Here's the headline, and if you need more information, I'm happy to break that down for you, right? So communication was definitely one big aspect. Another element was like all aspects of business, right? Like how do you think, how do you think about like what are the different aspects, pretty much, contracts, employment, like hiring, how do you think about the hiring, culture, like clients, contracts, all of these things. I think you need to have a basic education. Like you cannot not know these things, right? Can you learn them? Of course, 100%. I mean, trust me on this. You can learn core biology, you can learn this. And then, of course, another big skill set is fundraising, right? You need to be really, really good at fundraising, because that's the bloodline of your business, money of every business. So you need to learn how to really, really be good at communicating with investors and pitching your idea and making them wanting to give you money, basically. I would say those were the three main things that I at least had to face, was basically communication, everything around business operations, and then fundraising. I think those are the three main things that also every scientist for sure lacks.
Awesome. And so now that you're more in kind of a growth stage, what are kind of new challenges that you're facing, and what are you excited about?
So many things to be excited about and so many challenges at the same time. I think what we are excited about, it's the impact we're having, it's the clients we're working with, it's the incredible projects that we are mastering. I mean, the Lifebit core technology has been chosen as the platform that's going to be providing access and analysis to all UK's COVID-19 data coming from 35,000 patients. And we're talking about all genomics and clinical and phenotypic data. And not only that, but on top of that, another, biggest cohort in the UK of 100,000 patients with cancer and rare diseases, right? And that's one of the big projects that we have in this company. So so if you think about the impact, I think that's the most exciting thing. On the other hand, we're also very excited about all of the great people we're hiring in the company. Like everyone is just like, we're very excited because we're bringing really, really incredible, really intelligent people. And, their energy and the ideas and the things we want to do. It just, it's really nice every day. In terms of challenges, I think at the growth stage, the biggest internal challenge is how do you grow the company and you scale all of your processes while maintaining quality, while maintaining the right level of culture, and yeah, while also you're not losing your mind over it, because it's just so many things when you're scaling your business. And Lifebit is almost right. We've actually doubled the headcount of the company within 1 quarter, to make you understand. So went for pretty much, like 20, 30 people to now almost 60 people right now, 50, 60 people, right? And we'll keep growing the company. So yeah, so that's, and we'll keep almost doubling headcount in the next quarters to come. So that's the biggest internal challenge. How do you create these scalable processes that maintain your culture and the quality of your work? External challenges, it's always a client, I would say, client delivery and client demand. So it's, it's in the early days, it's a big problem because, you're trying to get more and more clients. In the later stages, you're now getting more and more clients. You're just like, how do I deliver into all of those clients? But at the same time, also, how do you, keep maintaining the growth, so you keep bringing more and more new clients while you are able to deliver onto them, and again keep that quality of output. So I think those are the challenges on a growth stage company.
Awesome. And you mentioned that you're now working with COVID data, and obviously right now with these changing times, there's a lot of things happening right now. As a startup, I think everyone has gone through a lot of pivots, either big or just small decisions that you have to re-navigate every time. Have you gone through some big shifts in your company in like what you do or customer base or something? And how did you kind of make those decisions of where to navigate your company?
I would say we haven't done any major pivots, right? But has the company evolved? Of course, every company will evolve. Where do you see most of the evolution, and where you should be seeing more of the natural evolution in the company is on your business model. But the business model and your go-to-market strategy will always evolving, especially if you're doing something right, it will keep evolving, right? Because you're gonna be understanding more and more your client segments. You're going to be understanding exactly how to pitch to them, how to approach that, how you are tailoring your solutions to their needs, and so on and so forth. So definitely, of course, when I look at the maturity of the company, that is the area that has evolved and matured the most. Other areas, and I wouldn't say other areas have had the same level of change, if you like. I mean, product and technology always changes, but that's nothing in a deep tech company. That's sort of everyday affair, right? You obviously, if you're innovative enough, you are constantly, on the edge and looking what's the next thing. How can I, make things more innovative? How can I enable new functionality, new business? So that I wouldn't say that's an area where we're just we never anticipated that this will happen. How do you make the right decisions? I mean, the lean startup way, I would say, right? You need to start with good hypothesis, as you were saying before, as a scientist, drive a small experiment or an actionable thing you can do it, collect data, and keep bouncing around until you find the right way to do it.
Awesome. And I have one last question before we switch on to the next interview. Is what advice would you give to a scientist right now who's thinking of diving into entrepreneurship?
I think they should definitely do it if they have a big passion about it. I can definitely tell them that this is going to be, a road. For me, switching to this, I was getting quite a lot of let's say, feedback from my scientific advisor that leaving the frontiers, the league of the cutting edge research is leaving the Olympics and just going and training into a small gym or squad or whatever, right? And that was one of my biggest fears, actually, transferring to a startup. Was just oh, am I missing out on the cutting edge research? Am I missing out on the impact I want to have? I can guarantee that if that is your fear, to every scientist listening to this, you should not be fearing of that. That's the biggest BS I've ever gotten as an advice. It's not like that at all. Like, you can have even more impact coming into actually a startup and doing it. But you should be very, I would say, honest to yourself, and brutal honest, that you should recognize your shortcomings, and you should very, very fast train yourself to account for that. That would be my advice, right? I mean, being a researcher in science, as you said, like, there's literally nothing that we cannot do, right? We're not strangers to working 8 hours. We're not strangers to suffering. We're not strangers to failing day after day, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you're not strangers to those things, literally there is no limits apart from like all of the skill set that you are missing and you need to acquire.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I'll turn it over to you.
So building on what Jun was saying, you were saying who inspired you? A lot of these things are about inspiration. So who inspired you to set foot into that entrepreneurship, scientific entrepreneurship world?
I mean, I have a lot of like different people that I admire, but I would say that the core inspiration for me was really this sense of impact and how can I have the biggest impact I could have. And it so happened that startup became the answer to that eventually, right? And then we started on that, and then yeah, keeps being successful, and it keeps being successful. So we're just like, yeah, we were right. So I think that was my biggest inspiration, I would say, like seeing that is the best way to have impact, and actually, you know, that being the case day after day. And what about you, Andrew? I mean, you also like started your company, and you're at the, you know, like at the higher growth stage than Lifebit. So what was that journey for you?
Yeah, so very similar. You know, I'm a scientist. Started off my career microbiologist, but very passionate on marine resources and sustainable management of our oceans and our ocean systems, and absolutely jumped at a chance to do a PhD in that area, looking at marine biotechnology, which at the time I was a student, marine biotechnology was very much in its infancy, certainly in Europe. And I could see huge potential for the generation of new bioactive materials derived from unknown biodiversity, because as they say, we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the ocean depths, so that for me was a huge impact potential. But but that time, entrepreneurship really didn't really cross my mind at the time. When I wouldn't even know how to define one. But like a lot of these things, you doors open for you, you walk through them. And my lab partner at the time, her father set up Cambridge Life Sciences back in '81, and it was him that gave me that inspiration to have a go, because there was someone right in front of me who had done it himself. And that sort of switched something in my mind to think, actually, the point that Jim was making, that we know the end users very well of the research that we do. So I knew that the application of the technology, I knew that there was a reason for doing it, and there was obviously a market need. Getting there was another thing. And after my PhD, I was very lucky to be awarded an enterprise fellowship, which was something that was done through the Royal Society of Edinburgh, which was set up 20 years ago to help bench scientists make that jump, a leap of faith into a commercial environment. And for me, that was a very good first step.
Excellent. And Andrew, I'm always curious, like, so, you know, now that your company has grown and you are clearly on a, you know, like on a, I would say, you know, proper path to being like a proper company, big company. So what are some of the challenges that you are facing right now? So what's the next stage of challenges?
Yeah, so my existing company, we're at that stage of moving from startup to scale up. So we're at that junction now. And to do that, fundraising is the first key challenge. We have to raise funds to deliver on the next growth of the business. So we're developing medical devices. So that means that we need to develop those into regulated products. So that comes at a cost. And with that will come growth challenges in terms of hiring additional people with the knowledge base to do that. as well as scaling up our infrastructure, our manufacturing infrastructure. And also doing that, as we meant earlier, sort of maintaining the culture of the business and balancing that. So there's all those challenges ahead of me, which over the next 18, 24 months is going to be quite exciting. But I'm really pleased we got to that stage now where we are now looking at that growth potential, which is very exciting. It's helped, that from that concept I had at startup, which was, hey, jellyfish collagen could be that new biomaterial that would just transform the ability to mend bones and skin and all this kind of thing, is actually coming true now. So, but now we need to build the business and pay the money to get it regulated. So that's where we are.
Excellent. And I mean, looking back, what would you say were some of the the biggest challenges that you had to overcome, in the beginning of your journey to where you are right now to reach exactly this stage?
Yeah, so this is my second time around at it now. So I've learned from the first time. Going back 20 years ago, when I was literally just a fresh-faced postdoc out of the lab, the challenges were fundraising, being taught how to present properly to investors. Sort of learned the hard way through being knocked back umpteen times, but back then I wish there was much more effort put on training scientists to become entrepreneurs. There wasn't as much back then. You had to rely on your network, which was admittedly for me quite narrow at the time, because it grows with time. But being able to pitch, getting a good network to help you support, good mentorship, all those things really do help accelerate that period of time between having an idea, setting the company up, and getting your first round to actually deliver on those hypotheses. Second time around, that was much more clear, but nonetheless still challenging. You still had an idea which needed to attract investment. So the same rules applied. You had to write a presentation pitch, a business plan, financial forecasts. All that had to form part of your proposal. But nonetheless, it was still challenging to find those right investors to come on board at an early stage, which is part of what we do. It's coming up with those, and it's about doing your homework, making sure it can be as polished as possible, that you, for any question you can imagine that you can defend against.
Excellent. And so this is very interesting because I mean, I have to ask the question: is it easier the second time around?
It's different challenges. You're more aware of what potentially could come your way, so you can anticipate those much easier, much better. So, for example, it took me 2 years to get to where I needed to go to my first company. It took me 8 months in my second one. So you're much more prepared. But it's not easier by any chance. But you are more experienced, and that does help manage those situations better. Yeah.
So would you say that you were sleeping more and better the second time around than the first time?
It was still challenging. It was still a worry. For my family, you were still thinking that, gosh, if this goes belly up, mortgage payments, all that kind of stuff. That kind of keeps you awake at night. But as you say, if you're going to fail fast, fail cheap. So which means that if it doesn't get off the ground, that's fair enough. You can start another one up and another one until you find the right path. But for any aspiring entrepreneur, give it a go, because the idea is good enough, it will carry forward.
So staying a little bit on that, Andrew, because I think that's one of the biggest advices that we can actually give to scientists. How important was it, fail fast and fail cheap for you? Because a lot of scientists, and most probably here, and I know this, especially because both myself and my co-founder were on that boat where we were like contemplating, I'm leaving great research and a career. And, we were part of those researchers that had, published our big Nature papers. So in theory, we had good chances, although actually the statistics is like only 2% of postdocs ever get to do any big research career. But, in spite of that, a lot of researchers tend to ignore the statistics. So, how important it is when you actually get into this journey, being honest with yourself and assuming an attitude of like, just like, if you are to fail fast and fail cheap.
Yeah, so you got to, by that, it's different at every stage of your life, because in my first go, I was on my own and I didn't have any dependents, and I could take a bigger risk. For the risk management changes all the time, and it's up to the person. It's personal choice at the end of the day. This time around, I had a very strong belief from my family, my wife, that what I was doing was correct. The science behind what I was trying to achieve was robust. It was based on peer-reviewed data, but the commercial opportunity that was the novel part of that could be therefore achieved based on about the approach I was going to take. I think really, if we hadn't have raised money for the first round money when we did, I think I would have probably put on the back burner because other pressures take over. But thankfully, we attracted some very nice early stage investors that believed in the concept, that enabled me to get to that next milestone, which demonstrated, yes, what I said back in my investment pitch came through, and that gave me confidence to invest again.
Yeah.
And it goes from there. Now, the challenge is to keep that momentum going, keeping the data that supports what we're trying to achieve in the right direction, and putting the right people around it, and management as the company grows is getting the right management in to deliver on what the corporate goals are going forward. So so I think that's the sort of broad way I would explain that. Yeah.
That's really, really amazing summary. I mean, I had exactly the same experience where we also started and was just like, if we don't get to Texas, we don't do it. If we don't get out of Texas, if we don't fundraise, if we don't then get our Series A. And I think it's a good mindset to develop, because then it actually distresses you, because as a scientist, like, you don't need to be thinking, oh, I'm doing this for 10 years. It's just like, 10 years of my life, but rather just like, let's get to the next milestone, and let's get to the next milestone. And if you're successful, you keep going at it. I think it's a much healthier attitude that I think will empower more and more people to actually give it a shot. But at the same time, as you said, it's very important to look at, what you're doing is based on robust and solid science or technology, or, you need to have your business model, and you need to have these things. So maybe as a last question before we move forward is, so what, we discussed about what, keeps you from sleeping, but like, what makes you, want to wake up actually when you eventually sleep, and, keeps things exciting for you in your day to day? Yeah,
excitement is actually, it's data driven for me. I'm a scientist at the heart. So it's when because our business model is that we have two parts of the business. We have one bit that's selling cell culture reagents. So collagen is the material that is used in many labs for growing cells in 2D or 3D as a reagent. And the amazing thing is when we get feedback from our customers that actually the material does what it says on the tin, and they've got good data, and they buy it again. And that's really good. That's awesome. Likewise, what gets me really excited is in the other aspects in developing medical applications, again, is that based on the data that we know building in our cell culture reagent business, it's forming that new innovation in how cells respond to that. So, for example, we're seeing some really interesting data emerge in some of the tissue engineering fields that we're applying ourselves in, which may, well, first of all, outcompetes the predicates, which is fantastic, but also may provide that next generation source of materials and engineering solutions to basically help us mend our bodies going into the future. So that really does, and it all coming from a very ancient organism like a jellyfish. So for me, that keeps me awake. That keeps me going. That's really cool.
Excellent. I mean, I can already feel that energy on you. And with this, I'll pass it on to you and just like
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. Billy, again, a pleasure to meet you, and looking forward to our interview. So my first question is, you're a scientist as well. So what gave you the inspiration to do that leap from, in your own experiences, from being from the bench to the commercial world? What was that idea that enabled you to do that leap?
I think it's kind of similar to what's already been articulated. So I was a researcher at Cambridge. I was working in the microsystems group there, and we were developing ideas around chemical sensor technology that could be used in security, industrial, and medical type applications. And I think one of the realizations that we came to was that actually, if we were to spin the technology out into business, that actually allows us to get it into the hands of people, as opposed to, I think what we felt at the time was, yes, we could do a design, we could get the paper published, but actually it would stop there. It wouldn't actually have any real world impact. So I think that was a big trigger for us. So myself and the other two co-founders, really. So how we can make ideas a reality as opposed to keeping them, stuck in the world of ideas.
And at this very, so your company's gone through startup, scale up and growth now. So, but going back to the startup phase, what mentorship did you attract to help you, develop the concept, the plan, as it were? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, we were quite fortunate. So there was quite a vibrant student entrepreneurship scene here in Cambridge. And I think, we had this technology idea, but we entered student business plan competitions. And as part of that, we got exposed to mentors around the area. And they freely gave up a lot of their time and expertise. So people have built very successful companies in the past who were, helping to train us, who had no clue about business whatsoever. So I think, we knew the technology, but didn't have the first clue about the commercial and the business aspects of it. So I think we found a lot of great support in the area to help us with that. And also what was important was we saw people who were quite close to us. So peers, 1 or 2 years above, who, they may have been in the same class as us before. And actually, they had spun a business out, they'd raised funding, and they were at the next stages of trying to develop that business. So I think it was a combination of those factors of, having mentors to help, teach us essentially and show us the way, but also saying that it was possible. It wasn't, people who were so different from us. It was people that we could relate to, that we could understand the path that they've been through as well.
So I noticed that you've been very successful in grant support has been very integral to the growth of your business. How easy was that? Because was it to access those overseas grants of support? Did you have help to do that? And how beneficial did that was that in the overall picture of getting you to where you are today?
Yeah, I think part of the theme that's been elaborated on earlier is, cash and capital is the lifeblood of the company. It's, you need money to get the best people in the world to solve really hard problems. So for us, we were able to raise investment, but also looked at grant funding, and particularly around the US, because our initial technology was a programmable chemical sensor on a silicon chip. As I mentioned, it has different applications. So we're able to secure a lot of US grant funding there. And in some ways, at that stage, you don't know what you don't know. So we kind of thought, well, there's money over here, let's just apply for it. So we didn't feel particularly afraid or worried about just jumping in and having a go at it. And I think that's a kind of important lesson in entrepreneurship, full stop. Just do it essentially, whatever it is, if it's, fundraising, getting out to pitch the idea, grant writing. I think just kind of getting stuck in and giving it a go is the best way to, almost certainly make mistakes and fail in the first instance, but that's usually the best teacher and the way in which you can refine what it is that you're doing to try and position for success in the future.
And now you're getting close to market with your main product, or you're on market?
Yeah, so the company has evolved over the years. So we had in mind, these different range of applications for the technology, but we saw that, the way in which we could get funded initially was through security and industrial applications. So we started to think about the medical use of the technology about 5 or 6 years ago. And, the principle here is looking at chemicals on breath. So the technology is breath biopsy. And our stated mission as a company now is to try and save 100,000 lives by detecting disease sooner and trying to guide patients to the right therapy. And part of that was, my wife was diagnosed late with cancer, and she died basically because it was diagnosed too late. And at the time, I remember having discussions with doctors, and they're like, well, unfortunately, it's detected late, so survival chances are only 5%. And I was like, well, what if it was detected earlier? And they're like, well, survival chances are 95%. So to me, that was a massive catalyst because, there's a kind of clear solution in sight. You need to detect disease sooner to get these better outcomes. And that's a very easy statement to make, but obviously the only way in which you can solve it is through solving difficult technical and scientific problems.
Sure.
So that led us to spin Owlstone Medical out as a separate company to focus on the breath biopsy products. So since then, we've grown to a team of about 170 people and raised about $90 million of investment. And we really are doing two things there. One is providing research products and services to academic and pharma customers, so helping them to find biomarkers in different diseases, while we take that technology and try and use it to discover biomarkers in early cancer detection.
And what biggest challenge do you see going forward? Now, you've done an interesting spin-out strategy there, which is, for a lot of growth companies, is an excellent way forward of sort of diverting one core product to as a very unique positioning. And can you describe any management challenges that you've had to face to actually develop that business model of spin-outs? What the management challenges have been like?
Yeah, like I think for a while we mulled over whether or not spin-out was the right thing, because we had the platform technology, but we did realize that actually, the business model is going to be different. The types of investors that want to come into the business are likely to be different. So there was a rationale to spin it out. And I think once we did that, it helped address some of those questions, but obviously it poses new challenges in its own right. So I think the medical part of the business, it is a very different animal. So, if you look at the technical risks, running clinical trials is inherently risky. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't work. So you have those binary risks in the development mix. And then that's set against your kind of more operational challenges, which Maria and yourself touched on. That as you grow the business, how do you make sure you continue to get the best people? How do you ensure that you have a culture that works and will deliver on these hard problems that need to be solved? So it's really those two things that we try to keep an eye on the day-to-day. How do you have the best people and the best culture in order to solve these fundamentally very difficult scientific and technical challenges?
And what excites you about the company? What gets you motivated in the morning? What is it that day-to-day drive that's taken you from this amazing story from startup to $90 million spin-outs and where you are today? What's that been?
I think it's, as you've all touched on, to me, the great promise of science and technology is the ability for it to have an impact. When you look at everything that surrounds us today, fundamentally, it's scientists and engineers that have made it happen. So I think we today face enormous challenges in healthcare, in energy. So I think that is a very exciting place to be as a scientist and engineer trying to solve some of those problems. And specifically for our company and myself, again, we see the way in which we can save lives if we can pick up cancer sooner. So again, it's an easy thing to state. So I think, myself, but also practically every single person in our company, 1 in 2 of us are going to get cancer. So everyone has been touched by cancer, in their family or extended family in some way. So I think that's just a massive motivator. So, we will give it our all. We'll try and run through brick walls in order to solve these problems, because if we do, the kind of impact is immediate and obvious.
What's your ultimate vision for your company?
So save 100,000 lives. That's our kind of North Star. So, that's what every aspect of the business, we have a very multidisciplinary team, from data analysts to biologists, clinical scientists, and everyone walks through the door and they know that the work that they do day in, day out is to try and save 100,000 lives.
Just another question I have as well. It's sort of, if a young aspiring entrepreneur came to you today, what would be the first piece of advice that you would offer?
I think it is basically just to give it a go, because I think it's easy, and I find this with myself and my other founders as well. It's easy to find reasons not to, or problems, or if I just do a bit more, then the timing will be right. And actually, I think that the biggest lesson that we've learned is you never quite know at the outset what you're about to encounter. It's only by jumping in both feet first and giving it a go that you really will learn and will make improvements. And I think another thing that was a key factor for us, and you kind of mentioned it as well, Andrew, that entrepreneurships and startups get portrayed as inherently quite risky. Actually, when I was a 24-year-old researcher, I didn't have a mortgage at the time. I didn't have kids. I wasn't so far through a particular academic or industrial career where it would have been a big risk. Actually, at that moment in time, I was like, this is the lowest risk time for me to do this. And I'm glad that I did. And I think that's a kind of key message that I would want to try and get across to others who are thinking about doing it, because business can be taught. Fundamentally, the concepts there can be taught. What can't be taught is that kind of deep scientific and technical knowledge that will solve hard problems. So I would say, scientists and engineers have a massive advantage there, because if they are in a research environment, they are at the sharp ends of innovation. And that's the stuff that you need to start with. Everything else can be taught afterwards. So I would say, just doing it is the key takeaway.
I fully agree with that as well. Sort of, if you're in your sort of early mid-20s, sort of coming out of you don't necessarily need to be a postdoc. You have PhD students, someone that has a great scientific idea that has based on good sounding platform, right, should be given the chance, opportunities to develop that idea further. There's absolutely no reason why not. As you say, you can learn a lot. And just lastly as well, I'm thinking, how helpful was the university environment to get your company spun out in its earliest forms?
Yeah, no, it's very helpful, because we were in the research group, so had access obviously to other researchers who were top of their fields, the department as a whole that was really cutting edge there as well. So I think that kind of put us into an environment where we could both see some of the problems that need to be solved, but also meant that we had access to the kind of ideas and the approaches that may be able to solve them as well. So it was a kind of massive boost up for us to be part of that environment. So I would say that's from the kind of pure tech scientific standpoint. But as well as the university itself, I think we did benefit massively from the kind of community of other entrepreneurs, all trying to give it a go, all learning at the same time as well. I was laughing earlier when both you and Maria talked about that ability to try and pitch your idea. When we first tried to pitch our company, myself and my co-founder, we went to a pitching training session, and the first go round, they actually didn't realize we were from the same company. We explained it that badly. So I think we were able to benefit from a lot of that kind of ancillary support around entrepreneurship. And again, the mentors who were really willing to give their time to sit with us and kind of lead us down the path and listen to our stupid questions, basically.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Bill. That's excellent sort of advice. Thank you.
So Thank you so much to all of our fantastic speakers for their thoughts, ideas, and advice there. Many of our fantastic leaders of tomorrow have their own ventures underway themselves, and many more of them have ideas around doing so. No doubt many more of them will feel enabled to or inspired to by this conversation. And we've got a great wealth of questions that have come through from those leaders of tomorrow themselves. The first of those, which I'll put out to the floor, is: do you think it's important for the future success of a scientific entrepreneur to choose a PhD topic or project based on the opportunities to commercialize it?
I can start there. I don't think you have to. I think a PhD training is extremely valuable in a lot of the ways we've talked about, that you get to practice coming up with hypotheses, testing hypotheses, and that resilience and that failure, honestly, allows you to learn how to fail faster and cheaper, as we've been discussing. So I don't think you need to have something. I think, we've seen great entrepreneurs who come out of very, very basic biology backgrounds and are now taking insights into an entrepreneurship or into an application setting. But at the same time, like, if you are driven for entrepreneurship, and if you're, if a specific topic is something you're passionate about, you should definitely spend more time there, because you're just gonna, embed yourself more in that topic and become more knowledgeable and be curious about it. And I think in general, pursuing your passions, you're going to be more energetic about. So I don't think it's a hard requirement to be a successful entrepreneur. Absolutely. I think everyone has different roads that they take. But at the same time, if you can find ways to do more of what you love, I think that would just help you in the end.
And also commenting onto that with my personal experience, like, if I was thinking of just like doing something in my life that was like commercializable, then I wouldn't be doing this, because when I started in bioinformatics, like, that wasn't even on the books. And every mentor I had, including my mom, were pretty much depressed, because they were like, why are you throwing your life? You are the best in everything pretty much. What's the career path here? Being an obscure, professor in a non-name university and so on and so forth, right? But I kept persisting on it because I just loved it, and it's an element to always factor in that. Also, as Steve Jobs was saying, you follow your passions and you create all of these dots, and when you are just like maybe looking back, then they connect into something that you've never imagined, right? So always follow your heart. My advice is. And of course, don't be naive about things, but just like, I think it's, no one knows what the future holds. No one knows that. And even, as I said, even when we were doing our PhD, where, and the work that we're doing there, which had quite a lot of translation in what we're doing in the company today, we didn't actually do it because we thought it's going to have a translation. We're just like suffering out of it. And we're like, we have to do something for the sake of our sanity here. And then it so happened that the whole world, it became a problem of the whole world at a point where no one ever thought that, genomics is going to becoming an everyday affair, right? So there is always this element that you cannot predict. And I think that's something you should always, and same goes for even if we look at the big technologies in biology, like CRISPR, who'd ever thought that a PhD in Alicante, doing a PhD on trying to understand bacteria on a salt lake, will eventually lead to CRISPR, right? So you never know, even the thing that you think like will never have that translational impact, it just has, and here we are, right?
Thank you. Yeah, fascinating answers. And I really love those words of curiosity, passion, persistence, and that feeling of never quite knowing, but still with that same excitement. Another question to put out to the floor, and perhaps from the experience of Andrew and Billy to begin with. As a team of often comprising many scientists and often coming from similar backgrounds, how do you go about assigning the roles on a team, such as CEO, CSO, CTO?
Okay, as a very good question. At the very early stages, it really depends on who feels more comfortable being out as the front face, as it were, who's more comfortable going out pitching, who's more comfortable, can communicate the idea more effectively to investors, who can manage projects. It's a difficult one. There's no easy answer. It's if someone has the skill sets to do that role, then fair enough. But it's a discussion with the founding team at the end of the day. For me, it's the person who is the strongest in the technology leads the technology. The person who's strongest in communicating that technology and building the plan and strategizing the way forward should be the CEO. Now, that's a discussion among the founding group, but that's the simplest I can probably say it.
I think one of the things to always think about is, what are you not good at? So there's a long list of things that I'm very terrible at, and when you look at the types of things that you need to be doing in those roles, I think the benefit often of working with researchers maybe in the same group as you, or people that you work with over a few years, is that you do have a good sense of each other and the strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that. And I think I look at the organization as a machine. You need all parts of the machine to work well together, as opposed to everyone all wanting the same role. I think there's a kind of natural tension or pressure there to for everyone to want the top job maybe, but I think ultimately it needs to come down to what are your strengths and weaknesses, and do they align with the actual needs and the position within the business as well, and realizing that all parts have to work effectively together for success to happen, otherwise the machine breaks.
That's Rachel. I'd also like to add as well, as the company grows, often the founding CEO will be asked to transition to a different role. That often happens. That doesn't always, but it's something that can happen as the company develops. So that's something to bear in mind as well.
Thank you. And then for those of our leaders of tomorrow who are pursuing this path, what are the mistakes that you see being made by those who are first-time entrepreneurs?
I mean, I can maybe quickly comment on that. For me, is a psychology of like basically this being your baby, and then if anything goes wrong with it, you just like die. Basically, you just like identifying too much and sort of like even defining yourself by the success of the company and the failure of it. I think as a first-time entrepreneur, I think that fundamental psychology leads then to a lot of like decision making that is very emotional rather than rational, right? And also to a lot of sleepless nights and mental issues and so on and so forth. I think that is the biggest mistake. I think you need to be, and for me, the best way to counteract that is always have an exit plan. Always have this, milestone approach. So like, I'm gonna do this, and this is my first milestone. If I don't make it through this, then that's the end of it. No big deal. Smart kid here. We're gonna do something else in my life. I think for me that is the biggest mistake. Because it influences, and the moment it influences your psychology, it will trickle down to everything that you touch, everything that you do, pretty much, right? Every like investor rejecting you, it's gonna be like, oh my God, I'm a failure. Every like client that you're not getting is like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. And it's always gonna come back to like, there is fundamentally something wrong with you. And if there is something fundamentally wrong with you, then it's just like, well, then you're not good enough to have a company, are you now? So it's going to be an always self-sabotaging thing where it's just like, if you like manage to come out of that psychology and be like, this is a project, this is a business, we look at the data, we are like, maybe it's not a good market need, maybe I don't have the skill set yet to take it through, but it then becomes about what it really is, rather than just like this functional, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's always something about either the market or the way you're pitching, or lack of skill set, or lack maybe of other people in the team that you need to get this through, right?
I often also think as well that scientists meet guilty as charged as well. often get too excited about the technology. We get so excited about the technology, we forget about the market. And I see so many young entrepreneurs that spend so much time on the technology that they don't actually do enough work on actually their market research. Who's their competitors? Is their product, although it could be the best thing ever, is it actually going to make a difference in the marketplace that someone's going to buy it? And also crucially, is the IP protected? You know, that to protect their value. So these are some of the early stage things that scientific entrepreneurs need to understand. Is yes, the technology is very important, but the market is equally important that they're selling into eventually. So.
I totally agree with what was just said. I think, yeah, that internal mindset, the growth mindset is so important. I want to add another element is the team. You know, investors are always looking at a whole team, and you know, you as one person, you can never do everything alone, especially as you want to build a gigantic company. You can't just have one person doing that. So really having good co-founders that you can work well with. I think as a lot of us as scientists, oftentimes we work alone and we have our own ideas, but to really surround yourself with good people, and not just your co-founders, but your first hires are so essential in your company. And you know, there's interpersonal things there, there's balancing of skill sets there, there's you know, the collective growth mindset in there. So picking the right team members and finding good people. And I think that's one thing I always recommend people, even you know, during their PhDs and whatnot, is try to find networking events and go out there and meet people, because that's the only way you're going to find the people who are going to build a company with you.
I agree totally with the point about getting too enamored with the technology at the expense of the problem that's trying to be solved, or the market itself. And I think when I think back to some of the most valuable things for me, actually developing sales skills probably had the biggest leveraging effect, because actually, yes, the science and technology will solve the problem, but in order to get investment, in order to get customers, in order to hire the best and the brightest, you know, fundamentally that's a sales job in each of those different categories. So I think being able to develop that skill matters a lot. I actually, my summer job as a student was trying to sell tickets on the punting boats going up and down the river, and that was the best sales training I ever had. That was like a kind of brutal, you know, eat or be eaten experience there, but it genuinely did teach how to sell, and I think that has really helped me and solve, you know, some of the problems that we need to solve in the company.
Thank you very much. We've just got just over 2 minutes left. Maybe we can squeeze in two more fantastic, important final questions. The first is that a perception that the most challenging part of bioentrepreneurship may be raising funds. What's the best strategy for a disruptive idea to gain investors' support?
For me, it's making very clear what the problem you're trying to solve on the first page. Why is there a problem in the first place? How are you going to solve it? And that's simple as that, because that will set the scene for everything else in the presentation going forward. So clearly say what the problem is that you're trying to solve and why there is a problem and why your technology can solve it. That's yeah.
And I think if you can do that, and then as a second slide, have sort of like the trend of that problem, right? Where do you see the market expanding, right? How is that technology going to have that growth? But not showing a lot of like early pitch. When you pitch on your early days, no one actually thinks your company as what's going to grow to be that technology, what's going to enable in the future, whatever it is. But they are actually just looking at, you know, focus only, this is the problem we're solving right now, you know? If you can show this actually almost like onion layer of like, where is the market? How is the market growing? How is this problem becoming bigger and bigger? What is that, you know, like how this technology has the potential to actually to expand, let's say, to more diseases or more this or more that, right? Then you're really shaping, you are very clearly showing a vision that you're not just here to just like, you know, like if you like opportunistically you have a problem and potentially you have a solution, but just like you've thought this through how the problem is growing, how the market is growing, and how you are going to be growing the company to capture that. I think that's another thing where investors really appreciate and very rarely see in pitches, right? And it will definitely get you more points.
Great. And so we've had a pitch deck workshop as well. Thank you. Final question for the last 30 seconds, 45 seconds. What are your thoughts as a panel on making entrepreneurship as mainstream as an academic career? And how can more scientists be encouraged to take this path?
I think it's hugely important. I benefited from a Scottish initiative called the Royal Society of Edinburgh's Enterprise Fellowship Scheme, which was very enterprising in itself almost 23 years ago when it was founded. That was one of the very first early platforms to enable scientists to make that leap of faith. It gave them a salary, it gave them some money to develop the idea. That I think would be a very good model to really sort of push out on that basis, where mentors come in, they really help educate the entrepreneur in pitching, in business modeling, in reading a profit and loss. These kind of extra skills I think would be very good. So I think it should be as important as an academic career personally. Thank you. And Jen, perhaps your perspectives from IndieBio.
Yeah, I think there are so many more resources around with accelerators and whatnot, but also a lot of academic institutions having entrepreneurship clubs or tracks. I know one PhD program actually makes every student do a 6-month internship in industry. So I think incorporating that into a PhD would definitely help, or making those opportunities more attunable. So, I sometimes say that IndieBio is a little bit like an entrepreneurial postdoc. So people, I think, are seeing that there are avenues to kind of get training in a little bit more of a rigorous way, just like their PhD programs. And I think, yeah, it's been really great kind of getting the word out. And if we can make these more of a mandatory thing as a part of your PhD, that would be even better.
Great. And I'll just ask for some closing thoughts from Billy, perhaps, if you could give us some reflections on bioentrepreneurship, what your thoughts would be and what you'd like to convey as a final message to our leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah, I think my message is simple, which is do it. Don't think of it as something that only other people do. This is something that you can do. So again, in society, we face enormous challenges in healthcare, energy, and beyond. And only science and technology will solve those challenges. So actually, you're in a better position than almost anyone else. And I would say now is the time to do it, because if you're earlier in your career, I think the risks are actually much lower. And actually, I think there's a much bigger risk of not trying it, because at some point in the future, you may have regret that you didn't try. So I think the risk is worth it to avoid the potential saying, I think I should have done that when I had the chance. So the message is simple: do it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. A very clear and a very powerful message. So I'd just like to finish off by thanking all of our speakers. Immensely useful wisdom, stories, and I'm sure this has conveyed a huge amount of excitement to our leaders of tomorrow. So for our leaders of tomorrow, the next session will be a diversity in biotech session, and we'll be really excited to move into some small breakout rooms and work on developing your thoughts in this space. So we will see you there.